Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, wherever you're calling from. Welcome and thank you for joining our session. This session is part of a 4-part series, virtual learning sessions on culture is prevention. Today's topic is the resilience of spirituality in the Native American culture and its role in prevention and healing. Our center is happy to partner with the National Hispanic and Latino PTTC to bring you this 4-part virtual series on culture is prevention. My name is Cindy Sego, and I am the program coordinator for the National American Indian and Alaska Native Prevention Technology Transfer Center. And to start our session in a good way, I would like to invite David Braveheart to say the opening blessing.
Thank you, Cindy. Once again, say good morning, good afternoon. Day in my language. Thank you for the opportunity to join and to start us off in a good way. I appreciate that we are able to express ourselves in these kind of gatherings, and honoring our way of doing things, our culture, our language, our songs. So with that, I would like to offer a song for all of us, and sending it out in a good way, and sending my voice to the Great Spirit and the people to the 4 directions, to all of our relatives. As we say, Madakwiyase, we're saying that to all of our relations, even the 4-legged, the winged, and all the living between the day and the night, and those above the ground and below the ground. So we honor and include all life that is part of our everyday walk of life. So with that, I'll say, let's do our opening song here. So I thought that song would be appropriate at this time. The words are, to the grandfather, send our voice and have pity upon us, for at this time we're having a hard time. And indeed, in light of what's going on in our country today, we are having our time. But thankfully, we have our songs and we have one another, and we have these opportunities like this to encourage and to share and to help one another. So with that, Cindy, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, David. Thank you for blessing us with that beautiful opening. So before we introduce our moderators and panelists, here are a few details about this series. The VLS will be recorded and archived for future playback. So if you'd like to go back to watch this session, it will be available within a week after this session. And it will be available on our websites and our YouTube pages. The lines will be muted throughout the presentation to minimize background noise. And we'll also get to a Q&A portion of our session. Please put your questions in the chat. Our moderator and I will be looking through the chat to see how we can answer some of the questions during the session, even before the end. So I'd also like to introduce you to our PTTC network. Our PTTCs are part of the whole TTC network, and it is a multidisciplinary resource for professionals in the professional field. It was established in 1993 by SAMHSA And the PTTC network is comprised of 10 regional centers and 2 national focus centers and a national coordinating office. The 2 national centers are ours, the National American Indian Alaska Native PTTC, which is focused on Native American communities and the workforce that provides to these communities, while the National Hispanic and Latino PTTC is focused on Hispanic and Latino communities and the workforce that works in those communities. So we are the National American Indian Alaska Native PTTC. Our mission is to provide training and technical assistance to substance abuse prevention field professionals, paraprofessionals, organizations, and others in the prevention field that are focused on Native American communities. We are focused on developing and disseminating culturally appropriate tools and strategies needed to improve the capacity of prevention specialists so as to deliver effective, culturally informed, evidence-based and knowledge-based practices to enhance the interventions and training happening in Native American communities. Our center is made up of we three and others that are not mentioned here. We have Anne Helinskinstad, who is our program director, and also Sean Bear, a member of the Miskoki tribe, who is our co-director. And I, Cindy Sego, I'm a member of the Akan tribe from Ghana in West Africa. I'm the program coordinator for this center. We also have Kate Trams, who is our communications manager, and Dara Jefferson, who is also on this call, who is our graduate students that works closely with us. At the end of this session, we'll have a brief survey for you to fill out. This satisfaction evaluation is important for the work that we do, and it provides the opportunity for us to improve our training efforts. So please take time to do this short evaluation for us. So to come to our presenters, our moderator and panelists. Today we have Connie O'Mara as our moderator. She's an enrolled member of the Citizen Potawatomi Nation of Oklahoma, and she earned her master's in social work from UCLA. She has worked to provide individuals and communities with wellness over 32 years, and her work is focused on providing support for Native American communities, families to resolve historical trauma and oppression in their communities. She currently works with SAMHSA Tribal TTA Center, which provides services to over 500 tribes and urban organizations. Ray Daw, who is also with us as a panelist, is a member of the Navajo Nation. He's bilingual in Navajo and English. He's a trainer and web designer for Takini Institute on the Historical Trauma Intervention Model. He was also formerly the key administrator for the behavioral health at the Yukon Kuskokwani Healthcare Corporation in Bethel, Alaska. He's a trainer and also an advisory council member for our national TTCs here, the National American Indian Alaska Native TTCs. Sean Bear, who is our co-director, is a member of the Miskoki tribe. He has his BA in psychology and human services, and also studied mental health counseling for over 2 years. He's a trainer. He also develops curriculum, and he's a veteran of over 9 years with honorary discharge from the 82nd Airborne. He has worked as an administrator and co-director for our center for several years. And David Braveheart, who said our opening blessing, is a member of the Oglala Lakota tribe and also works with the SAMHSA Tribal TTA Center. He has experience providing trainings, developing curriculums, and he and Connie work closely with our center on providing several trainings, including the Native American Substance Abuse Prevention Skills Training. So thank you. I'd like to hand over to Connie right now to begin our session. We thank you and everyone for joining us in our session today.
Thank you, Miigwech, Cindy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Bonjour and hello. Connie O'Mara and Deshnakas, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Donjuba, Nishnabé, Potawatomi, and Dao. I am, as Cindy said, work as the training for the Training and Technical Assistance Center funded by SAMHSA with Dave, and we often collaborate together. And this powerful topic that we're going to talk about today is always part of every training we do. Culture, tradition, spirituality, no matter what the training's about, if it's focused on behavioral health, if it's focused on suicide prevention, the foundation is always culture and spirituality. So it's a very powerful discussion we need to have today. And as Dave said, many of our relatives are suffering. Many of our relatives are struggling right now. And sometimes that means they don't have the same access they have to what they usually do spiritually. But because of our resilience as Native people, people are finding a way to stay connected and to practice the important traditions that they need to practice. I just want to say one more thing before we talk to Mr. Don, Mr. Bear a little bit more about our first question, is that my journey with spirituality will always be a lifelong journey. But the first word that comes up for me when I think of spirituality is gratitude. I'm a person in long-term recovery, and I wouldn't even be here today if it wasn't for my connection to culture, and spirituality. So, and I'm able to live a life of sobriety and help others too. So I'm very grateful for that. So thank you all for being here today. Our first topic is something that we want to have you respond to, and Mr. John, Mr. Bear talk a little bit about to get us started. And the question that we came up with is what spirituality really means to you and what role it plays in your life. And so now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Daw for a little bit more discussion on that. Thank you, Miigwech.
Yeah, Miigwech too, Connie. Before, well, you've heard my name, but I need to do a formal introduction of myself and to my people who I see. We have several on the line. I am Kia Ani, Epashins Chin, born for the Towering House clan, and Tlazalana, Epashins Chin, Kia Ani, Shlino Tlazalana Pashins Chin, Tsitna Jini Dashache, and Todachini Dashanada. I'm born for the Towering House people. My father's clan are Bitter Many Goats people. My maternal grandfathers are Blackstreet people, and my paternal grandfathers are Bitterwater people. And it's important for us as Navajo to do this formal introduction. And I'm originally from Hawk, Arizona, which is South Navajo. In our ways, that begins to lay out who we are individually and begin to create relationships with within our people, because we have an extensive clan system, and there are a whole array of teachings and stories around each of the clans that we have. And they go back to teachings and stories from our Creator and our holy people, and how we came to be as the Navajo people. And so from that process, culture for us begins with who we are, clan-wise, and where we originate from. And that grounds us as traditional practitioners, as traditional people, grounds us spiritually as well, in terms of how we are with each other. There are some Navajos that are probably related to by clan on this call. And because I went through the process of introducing my clans, we now have a relationship. They're either my sons, my grandsons, my daughters, my granddaughters, or siblings this way, right? Or aunts and uncles. And that begins to formulate our our ways of being with each other, not only here, but also when we meet, either telephonically or personally. So from Yate Doret, and so this is how we begin to lay our culture out in Navajo. And it's a very similar process with many other tribes that have clan-based systems as a way to establish identity, as a way to put out for each other mainly who we are and where we come from. Yate Rebecca and I'm seeing names come up on chat already, welcoming. And so it's important for us to acknowledge each other this way. So culture for us in Navajo begins from there, from a very basic level. And our spirituality then extends from there. We have relationships with all things. And we have identification with all things in the traditional Navajo way. Tzitlistan, Twistan, mountain woman, water woman, darkness, daylight, corn pollen. These are things that we, just a few of the things that we identify as having presence with us and having, yeah, Rebecca, having presence with us, and how we begin to relate with each other, and then how we begin to relate as the net people, and this place that we have in the world. Our spirituality, our way of believing and our way of being comes from that, so that we have, we tell our young ladies and young men who they're going through coming of age ceremonies that because we do have these ways of being, these ways of doing, we have strong clarity and very little doubt about who we are and where we come from, and the extensive history we have going back to our ancestors, and generations back, and then our ancestors that are here today, and then our relatives moving ahead to our children and our grandchildren. And our world just kind of builds like that. So spirituality as prevention, really, from the way I understand from my mentors and my teachers, comes from who we are. We live in a land of mountains and valleys and trees and water and air. And we have relationships with all that and more. And these relationships firmly a big part of who we are as the net people. And through these relationships, and we carry reverence with each other, and then with the world around us, the universe, Earth. We have reverence with that, and that reverence, we practice that, and we carry that in our being. Then we have a strong resilience that way, and we're able to cope and contend with the challenges that we have in our lives, and the challenges that we have within our families, the challenges that families have externally and internally. And so it really is fairly encompassing that way. And I think because it's that way, it is really difficult for many non-natives to understand the extent to which reverence and respect really have a strong interplay with our way of being and our way of doing things, which is often called spirituality. I'm a child of God, and I'm a child of the Creator. I'm a child and grandchild of the Creator. And there's no doubt about that in our way. And because I'm a child of the deities, then I'm never alone. I'm always within the presence of the deities and within the presence of my people. And that's how we are as the net people, and that's how we are taught to be, and that's how we're taught to conduct ourselves with respect as well when we interact with other people. So I'd like to begin that way. It's a kind of a complicated explanation, but as I'm talking, I'm translating in my head the things that I'm told in Navajo, and that's always a process of communication. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Da. Thank you so much. I wondered if Sean Bear was available, if he would like to make a few comments too, opening remarks as we explore what spirituality means to us. That was a beautiful description. I have Navajo grandchildren through my marriage, and so I totally related to what they've taught me and shared with me too. So was very wonderful information. Sean, are you available?
Sean is having trouble connecting. Where he is having some internet issues.
Okay, great. Well, we've had some questions in the chat box and some different comments in the chat box as well. And so I want to thank you all. A lot of you really appreciated hearing more about Ray and sharing the connection to culture and spirituality. And some are interested in knowing even more about connecting. Some folks who work with Native people realize that as you provide behavioral health and mental health support, you really need to be able to understand where people are coming from, both culturally and spiritually. So thank you so much for your questions and your comments. I also forgot, I wanted to thank my colleague, Dave Braveheart, for that beautiful opening. And Dave, you may have some comments that you'd like to share too, because I know you're very connected to spirituality and that you do attend your ceremonies regularly. So would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, I don't mind jumping in. And thank you, Ray, for your good words and wisdom as you share those with us in a good way. You know, I think spirituality for me is really about a way of life. It's not something that you can kind of put in a box or, you know, capture in some way, but it is a way of life. It's a way of thinking, a way of conducting ourselves in our homes and within our family, or we call our Tilshbai in Lakota, in our community. You know, as Cindy mentioned, I'm Oglala Lakota, and I'm enrolled on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And, you know, our culture and our ceremonies are alive and well. And, you know, I see people, family and relatives and friends are practicing, you know, their spiritual way of life and, you know, walking, as I say, the red road in a good way. You know, that's all about, you know, having good understanding and you're trying to walk in the humble manner. That's really important. I think humility is really important, you know, as we, you know, try to tie that into being grateful for our everyday walk of life, for all the gifts and blessings that we have in front of us, you know, around us. You know, I always teach my kids to talk to them often. So what are the 3 things you're grateful for? Because I think, you know, you hit it on the nose, Connie, when you talk about gratitude. I think if we can practice some gratitude every day, it helps keep life in perspective, you know, our health and well-being, our mental health, emotional health, and it all you know, contributes to our spiritualness about us, you know, our presence that we take wherever we go, within our home and within our community. But yeah, I can talk about sweat lodge ceremony and Sundance and Vision Quest. We've all done that, but it's a personal experience, and but it makes us part of who we are today and who I am today. And this year we weren't able to Sundance because of the COVID-19. The Sundance chief and all his helpers decided that it was best to not have it this year, which was pretty hard. We depend on prayer to help us through these times, you know. But prayer is with us wherever we go, and we have our own ceremony. You can even stop and sit down on the ground and draw a circle in the ground and put a cross in it, and that represents you know, the universe and the 4 corners of directions. And you can just say a prayer there, and maybe offer some tobacco or burn some cedar or sage or sweetgrass like I have here. So, you know, it's wherever you are. And yeah, it's nice to be able to gather with relatives and community members to be able to Sundance. But, you know, for right now, we're at home, you know, take care of ourselves and our family. And that's what's important. We have that way of life, that prayer life. And so it's probably a longer response than you expected, but I just want to share that much, but I appreciate the opportunity to share in a good way.
Miigwech, thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate you sharing that, and I know you to be very connected to that, and it is part of your work as well, because when we're spiritually and culturally grounded, we meet people where they are usually, and that helps empower them. And we have had a lot of questions in the chat box about how do I get reconnected, and so we're trying to answer those as we can, but that place of connection is so critically important. So thank you so much. We have some additional questions too. And I know in the chat box, there's a question from Alejandro Flores, and he says, how do we address the concept of spirituality with those American Indian urban versus reservation in behavioral health settings as a support system? So kind of, I'm wondering if Mr. Daw or you, Dave, could talk a little bit about how do we do that and how have we done that in the past?
We one of the things that we encourage is developing an ability to determine where a Native person is with their assimilation and acculturation process. That really helps guide possible next steps towards how, what, when to incorporate culture and spirituality into discussions with a Native person on their mental wellness, their addiction, or their coping with the challenges that we have in life. And fortunately, through the center that Cindy and us are affiliated with, we have a number of opportunities to begin to explore ways to learn that. We provide discussion sessions on culture and spirituality right now every other week. And there are behavioral health support Zoom sessions that occur every other week too on Wednesdays that people can sign into and have broad discussion on a number of topics. So there are these ways of doing and practicing that are pertinent. And it goes to what I think we learned when we were in grad school, or when we learned in the Euro-American systems. And we're taught this very strongly in the Native ways also, is a process of learning. And the process of learning is lifelong. And as a lifelong process, then it is valuable. I'm taught it's important to stay in touch with that process of learning, and not be comfortable to believing or thinking that I have learned everything, that I'm knowledgeable about everything, and to take the flip side of that kind of thinking, to be humble, that I don't know everything, that I don't have all the experiences in the world, and therefore it is valuable for me, important for me as a human being, as a natural, to continually seek learning opportunities and to explore. That's a very basic concept within the Navajo framework, and then to contemplate the things that we learn, so that we begin to put these experiences into our cognitive being and our mental way of being and our emotional way of being, because those ends up making us stronger individuals and more resilient people, and being able to cope with the challenges in life, and be able to know how to begin to approach the kinds of diversity that exists in Native country. I'm a very traditional person. There are a lot of Navajos who are not that way. And for me, it's important to understand that the way of being Navajo, who is strongly assimilated and strongly acculturated into the Euro-American way. It's just important for me to know that and to explore it so that I can be a better helper that way. But that'd be one of the first steps towards answering that question on how to support Native people from wherever they might be, culturally and spiritually. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. We've had a couple of other questions too, and it seems as a lot of folks really want to know more about how being outside of the Native culture, how they can be more supportive and helpful to Native people, especially if they work in the behavioral health field. Also, there was a question about tribal feelings and views of what is happening on a more collective level, and how do we do that healing together. And so I don't know, I'll just give you my example. I came to my culture and spirituality a little later in life, and in recovery, I was able to learn more in realizing that I am a part of a tribe, a collaboration of tribes. We each had a role, and we did something for our collective wellness to be able to stay and grow together. In our culture. And so we each had a role, in our role as the firekeepers of Potawatomi. That role connected us all so we could all survive, and each had a different role too. And so I think a lot of us feel that way. Even, we still connect intertribally. That's what powwow and some other things are about, and that has kept us alive too. But I want to open that up for discussion with Dave and with Ray too as well. And Cindy, please jump in as well.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say women's first. Just kidding. Well, I think that's a good question. When I think back home, in my experience, and we have a lot of folks who come from many different tribes that are enrolled members who have mixed, maybe part Crow or Arapaho, and come from different tribal communities, but yet a lot of them are Oglala, Lakota, and I'm also Hunkpati, Dakota. So I'm actually two tribes. And what I found interesting is that when we all do come together, because Connie, you mentioned, dancing, I see a lot of people from different communities come to powwow, for a social dance. And yet, and each one of them, they're there for a certain reason, and you don't know until you ask them. So what are you here for? Well, I'm here to dance and have a good time. But it's deeper than that, because a lot of them are dancing because they had a dream, or they had a vision, or for whatever reason, they're there to pray. Their dances are prayer for family, for her relatives and friends, or for the people. And some of you might have been on Facebook. There's a social powwow group there that a lot of people are posting a dance, and a prayer dance. And that's kind of what really ties us all together. Even though we come from different tribal communities, but it's pretty. You see that commonality that connects all of us, through that prayer, through that dance, and it's pretty awesome. But if you ever go to a powwow, just even look at the dancers. I'm pretty sure that every one of them are there dancing a prayer, and trying to, give thanks, or even just to pray for healing and things like that. It could be for many reasons. But, at the same time, they're there to have a good time and to, be a good relative to whoever they come in contact with. And that's one of the things that I teach my kids is wherever you go, be sure to be a good relative. Treat people in a good way as if they're your relative. And really, we're all related. But even at the Sundance, you see different tribal people come together for a common prayer. And that's to me, that's what's beautiful of what I've seen in our culture, our way of life, and our spirituality is the ability to come together no matter what walk of life we come from or what tribe. It doesn't matter. And you're allowed to be who you are, and you're allowed to pray in your own language. And it's just awesome to be a part of that way of life and to feel like you're a part of something that's so much greater than you, and it's a blessing.
Thank you, Dave. And we've had a lot of folks in the chat box sharing different resources as well. And thanks to Jackie Gray for her indigenous ways of knowing and counseling, and some other folks have shared some great resources. So be sure and grab those as we're going through some of the questions. We also had a question or talking point that we came up with about the relationship between spirituality and religion. And although, spirituality forms a foundation for religion and a worldview, it's really personal. People learn as they're growing up in families, and they decide which direction they're going to go. But I know in my case, it started with being Catholic, and then that wasn't working, and then moving into something that made more sense for me. So I just want to open that up to Mr. Daw and Mr. Brayford to talk a little bit more about that. And please continue your great questions and resources in the chat box. We really appreciate it. Sorry that we're not getting to all the questions, but we will try to do that here in a few moments. So.
If I may, I can work on developing this. So the English word religion in and of itself has developed a very negative connotation, and that very negative connotation begins with the process of colonization. As Connie mentioned, many of our people have adopted or forced to adopt Judeo-Christian faith and denominations and practice over the centuries, and in the name of religion. And so in the name of religion, many of us have not developed strong appreciation for that word. Among my people, one of the things I hear from my people, my mentors, is that our way of practicing spirituality, the Navajo, is not a religion, because we don't force people to adopt the Navajo way. And because we don't force people, then we're not a religion. In the same kind of context that the Judeo-Christians ways have been forced upon indigenous people across the world, and ends up being the center point from within which genocide and power is fought for, and in many places around the world. And then so that's how that word religion resonates with many of us. On a different level, the Neja, we say the Navajo way, the Neja and the Navajo way, that's how we describe our way of practice, our way of being, our way of learning, our way of being who we are, and the Nechico, and the Navajo way. We do have concepts and teachings that really resonate well with the Judeo-Christian system and all other world ways of being, whether it be Confucianism or Buddhism, or Russian Orthodox or other tribal ways. So there's a lot of resonance to these different ways of being. We recognize that. And we believe in the way that we all pray to the same creator. It's just the manner and the language and the styles in which we pray and offer blessings that's different because we come from different environments, and our teachings might have differences among them, but when you put them all together, they're all the same. And so we're taught in Dineche that not to be critical or not to be punitive towards other ways of being. And that's how we describe other ways of being. We don't use that word religion. Other ways of being, to be respectful of them. And if offered an opportunity to be with and observe and participate in other ways of being, whether it be a Baptist church or Lakota, the Nipi, or tobacco ceremony in Blackfoot, for example. These are the ways of being. Then we take opportunity to do that out of respect, and not to say that the natural way is the only way to be, but to be accepting of all these other ways, and to participate and learn and observe. It goes back to the concept of learning, and to watch and see where there might be ways that resonate with who we are as people. And it's okay to learn songs from other ways. It's okay to learn those songs, but to learn them in a way that is practice, and not to appropriate them inappropriately, which is another real important thing, because those are not Navajo ways of being. If someone from a different ethnicity wishes to participate in the Navajo way of ceremony, that they can participate in many of them. But entryway into some of the more strict ways of being ceremonies is tougher to do. So it's not uncommon for non-Diné people to have protection or blessing way ceremonies among my people. Nor is it uncommon for Navajos to go to other tribes and have blessings and prayers and other things done when there's trouble. And that's how much in flux ways of being are, I think. But when we get rigid and tight with the ways of being that we are, that's when that word religion starts to come in, and the negative connotations that come with it come in, and that's not humanity. That's not being human, and that's very disrespectful to the Creator. That's how we're taught.
Thank you, Ray. We've had a few comments, and some folks would like to know, how do we address tensions between folks that are traditionalists and Christians in a respectful way? I know, I'll say something really quickly. I know in our center, and Cindy too, we have used an approach called Gathering of Native Americans, and it brings people together with a focus on belonging, mastery of our trauma together, because we all share that. We all share that trauma, that historical perspective of what's happened to us. And then that interdependence and that generosity where we work together and we find solutions and we give back. But I'm interested in any other comments about how we can do that.
So Connie, and now sitting here as Ray was talking, and I appreciate your words again there, Ray. And I can only draw upon experience. I know that a lot of us probably have heard stories from our relatives, grandparents, and such who might have gone to residential boarding schools. I know my father did. He went to Holy Rosary Indian Mission School for 13 years, which is a Jesuit school, Catholic school, and we can talk about a lot about some of the atrocities that happened there. And we have these stories about how the land was taken. There was this white man that came with a Bible in hand and on the other hand grabbing the land. So how do you separate that? You talk about a Christian person who comes and takes the land and then kill the people and oppress and all those things. So there is that history back there, and it's really hard to separate all that in our today's world. But as I mentioned, my father, he goes to church every day at the school where he went for 13 years, Jesuit Catholic school that was trying to assimilate him, make him something that he's not. He cut his hair, changed his language, changed his belief, and convinced him that the Lakota way of life was but he defied all that, and he came to terms with all that because he still practices our native spirituality, which is to me is a good example, a role model. And I've seen that in my grandparents and other relatives who go to church on a regular basis, but also who go to ceremony too. But they always taught me that it's about coming together for a common prayer. Everybody pray in their own way, and we're not here to try to change anybody or force anything on each other. Let's support each other, and you can believe the way you believe, because that's part of that individuality that we do have in our way of life. So it is tough, I think, for a lot of folks to try to separate the two. But I've seen it, in front of me that happened, where people were able to not feel like they were living in conflict and able to embrace both ways of life. One is structured, organized, which is religion, but spirituality that's comes from within, and a way of life. That's what I've seen, and I'm okay with that. I was a product of the boarding school too, and I've seen some things, but I'm still connected to the Holy Rosary Indian Mission School, and when I go there, I don't mind going to a service now and then. But the same afternoon, we're going to a sweat lodge. So it's possible, but it's all individual choice and things, and there's no right or wrong. I just think it's a way of how we choose and everything. But my thoughts and my experience.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much. And there's been so much discussion from what everybody shared, and I think people are really getting a lot out of this. So I want to open it up to Ray, if there are other comments. I know that we've been talking about how we're all at different points in our journey, and that journey continues as an ongoing, and we learn a lot. So I know I'm having a little feedback on my end, so I'm going to let folks talk.
I'd like to, there was a question that was asked around how do we incorporate Native teachings with persons who are Judeo-Christian in orientation. This goes back to the value on learning and teaching. Like Dave Dave mentioned, I'm a student and graduate from boarding school, and so in my early, especially in my early life, experienced uh, forced Christian practice, and but that also afforded me some really good opportunities to learn about the Christian way, and as a human being, I value the learnings that I picked up from Latter-day Saints, Catholics, Baptists, Christian Reform, Methodists, because those are denominations that I've had chance to be in and learn. And also how there are five, from those five denominations that have specific experiences with how they take the Bible and interpret them in five different ways and practice in five different ways. And that's always found it to be really interesting. And that's how there are all these denominations from under the Judeo-Christian umbrella. And that these denominations come from one piece of writing, one piece of teaching, which is the Bible. And it's always been fascinating for me to see how there have been over the centuries conflict between Protestants and Catholics, for example, that are long-standing and intergenerational and historical, although they stem from the same basic teaching, which is the Bible. And that's the interplay of religion. That's religion. When folks tend to get really rigid around saying that my denomination is the only way, or my way of understanding the Bible is the only way, and that creates a lot of conflict. And how it is that we end up having the kinds of genocide that we've seen across the centuries across all parts of the world, not just Judeo-Christian, but there are other times when they've been forced religion upon different kinds of people. So, as a Navajo person, I value the learning that I've gained from the Bible, and what I'd like to tell people, my kids especially, for example, that I've read the Bible front to back twice. Because for me, especially as a young child, I was curious about where all these denominational teachings were coming from. And I'm really impressed that the Bible in and of itself, begins with creation, Genesis. And the book of Genesis really lays out for me a real clear understanding, appreciation, and reverence for that process of creation and all the things that come with it. According to the Bible, God created the world in 7 days, and all living beings come from that time. And men and women were created within that context. It's not very different with the way many of our traditional teachings are around the creation of men and women. Humans come after creation of the world, and that's how we're taught. And because we're kind of the late arrivers, latecomers to the world as human beings, and all these other parts of the world have been created before us, and that's where our reverence comes from. It's important to have respect for that. So the Bible, I think, lays out really, really well in the book of Genesis, God's creation of the world and all the things that come with it, the birds and the bees and the trees, and it's just a really nice story within it that makes it possible for me to relate to that part of the Bible and say, yeah, this is really not that different from Navajo, Navajo way of being. And so for me as a Navajo person, when I meet a Native person who's a Christian, then it's available for me to know the Bible and to where they're coming from. It's important for me to know when they talk about revelations, what they're talking about, so that I can have a dialogue with them and be able to resonate with what they're saying and have an understanding of where they're coming from, particularly if they're having troubles with their mental well-being or addictions or physical health or something like that. It's just good to know these things, I think.
Thank you, Ray. And we had a comment from Magdalena that thank you. She really appreciated the acknowledgement and practice of integrating our two worldviews and bridging them in a good way. So she was making that comment. We could shift gears a little bit, maybe if people are ready to do that, to cover a little bit more. But we've had a question here that I'll put out to our presenters: is to what extent is the medicine wheel used in mental health care to guide people who are struggling to achieve a balance and to experience the connection? Maybe a little discussion about the medicine wheel and how that might be used. It's different in each of our communities, and if that's helpful to engage people who are seeking help.
Go ahead.
I could jump in there if you want, Ray. I know you just got done talking, and I'm not a mental health practitioner, but practicing spirituality and trying to impart walking in balance. And I know I've talked to people who talked about using the medicine wheel as a way to gain some understanding of oneself. Because you could easily take a medicine wheel and look at the physical, the emotional, mental, and spiritual as you begin to do like a self-assessment. I could see people doing that where, where are you in terms of, when we talk about balance your life, in terms of health wise, physical, well, what about your physical self? Let's take an assessment, and so on with the emotional and spiritual aspects of ourselves. And it kind of maybe even doing like a baseline assessment, if you're just going into recovery, whatever that might be, from drugs and alcohol, or from having anxiety or panic attacks or some other kind of mental health issue, you kind of begin to measure, look at where you might be improving. So I could see it being used as a tool like that. I've seen people use it that way, but I haven't really used it myself. I've talked about it and things, but I think that it's like anything else where you can use the tool to the medicine wheel as a way to gain a better understanding of yourself and what areas you might want to improve in, or look at strategies, or taking steps to improve one's health and well-being. And whatever, however that works. But I don't know if that helps or not. But I do know that it can be a useful tool.
I'll go ahead and pick up the conversation from here, Connie. Thank you, David, for your explanation. Well done. The medicine wheel concept, conceptually, has variation across different regions and different tribes. And the concept of a medicine wheel begins with a circular form. There's a circular form. And from that circular form, then, because we all have different ways of being and different teachings that come from our tribal ways, then we begin to understand that circular form differently. The Navajo system, for example, the Nechico, we have on the east we have white, because it's where dawn comes up. The dawn brings up the white light, and on the south we have blue, South is the direction where the sun kind of sets, and there's blue sky generally with it. And then to the west we have yellow. That's our third color. And yellow, because when the sun sets, you can see really nice reddish and yellow hues that come with the setting sun. And then our fourth quadrant to the north is black, because that's when the sun goes down and life in the world turns dark black. So the Navajo system of understanding the circular ways, or the medicine wheel, you might call it, has these four colors. I'm giving this as an example of how intertribally there's variation, not only how we identify the quadrants, but also how we describe them and how we label them. I have a mentor who once put together a version of a Navajo medicine wheel. It got very complicated because he was putting in as many of the teachings as possible into the four quadrants, and a lot of it wasn't that much different from other medicine wheels that I've seen being used and taught. But I think use of a medicine wheel is a really good teaching tool, a learning tool to work from, whether it be the non-Navajo person or Lakota person. I really value the concept of circularity of many of our Navajo ways of healing include circular forms. We call, they're called sand paintings in the American way, but many of our sand paintings are circular. And so we take circularity as a valued part of our world, as a valued part of our understanding of humanity and our existence in this world that is circular. And gosh, the whole solar system goes around in a circle, and the Earth turns in a circle, in a clockwise direction. So circularity then is depicted in a medicine wheel that way, the way I understand it. It's just really exciting to realize that. I think it's just, gosh, there's so much one can contemplate on something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. I totally agree. I know a lot of the time when we do curriculum, I think Sean, I don't know if he's been able to connect, and we'd love to have him share, but he's always, it seems like he's connecting it to that circular way of thinking. And a lot of our resources that we use, because Native people are more circular than linear, and so if ever we use those symbols, and we find ways to make it work for everybody, because we all have some common feelings about our spirituality and about our love for each other and about taking care of each other, that those things are shared. So thank you for your words. I think I want to thank our participants. For one reason is that they've been sharing a lot of different resources with each other, and that's so helpful. And that's why I think we do these kinds of sessions, so you can learn from each other, and we appreciate all that knowledge, and we learn from you as well. I think we'll shift, because I know we have a little bit more time, but I would like to shift a little bit to talking about how the practice of spirituality is helping us during this really difficult time of COVID, and how we're finding ways to cope and still stay connected. And like Dave mentioned it a little bit in the beginning, about it's a loss, but yet there's ways we find to connect with each other and to support each other. So I'd like to kind of shift that discussion that way, so we could talk a little bit about that. Just a real quick comment for me. I'm far away from my grandbaby, and as you know, family is everything, and I haven't been able to see her. And it's not the same, but that connection that we make, FaceTiming, and that connection that we make, and I've been doing a little teaching of the language with her so that she'll have it when she's starting as young as she is. And so that gives me hope that this time is not wasted. This time is important, that we find ways to stay connected and do our teachings and pass on our traditions. So I want to open it up for that discussion about how are we coping, practicing our spirituality during this difficult time.
Well, I'm grateful that we do have technology. When it does work, it's amazing. I know that a lot of families are, especially during this COVID time, are connecting to Messenger, some kind of video conference that they can connect and stay in touch and support one another. And it's also the kind of work that Connie and I do, and as well as Cindy, who do, like even doing this Zoom. I think it's really important that we can use it to try to stay connected mentally and emotionally, at least, but physically. I know it's not the same, where we can be in the same room. But I think a lot of communities are probably using telehealth to reach out and to their to a professional for that mental health well-being. I think that's really important. And when I think about youth, I think it's important to be able to try to figure out different ways, different strategies to engage them, even if it means to try to teach some kind of a cultural thing, like making a regatta, beading, or maybe they can go out and identify or bring a plant or back and share a plant that they found that's medicine, and they can learn about what their language, what they call that in their language, and that medicine that they found. But yeah, I think during this time it has been challenging, and I know a lot of tribes have connected with their youth through Zoom or through other types of platforms to continue to teach. Maybe even those who are future leaders of the community, and have any workshop or presentation on youth leadership, things like that. But yeah, all those things are, it's been a learning curve for a lot of our tribal communities. This is a new time, really unprecedented. How things are unfolding, and people need to connect by practicing social distancing, and if it's through Zoom, then I think it's how you put it together and what you put out there, particularly for our youth, and how to engage them. I think it's important, and youth really know technology pretty good, so I don't think that's too much of an issue for them. But anyway, that's kind of my initial thought.
Thank you, Dave. Yeah, we're always learning from our youth. They're always teaching us skills, and that's that knowledge goes both ways. I just want to mention real quick, Ray, before you make some comments, is that Dave and I, where we work, there was that immediate. We do work remotely anyway, but there was that immediate thought that we needed something to support us during this time, and so we have our talking circle once a week, and that is so helpful. The other thing about working remotely or doing some of these on Zoom is that gift of humor is always there, and it's so uplifting during this difficult time. And Dave is one of the funniest guys on it, so I just want to say that we're really glad to have him on there, and that we do support each other that way as well. So Ray, would you like to make a few comments about this too?
Yes, I'll do that. And I thought I'd begin by sharing that in the teachings of almost all the different ways of being that I'm aware of, teachings include some discussion and description of harder times or traumatic times in those stories, great floods, war spot, battle spot, hunger, starvation, are frequent occurrences or frequent parts of our stories, our histories. I mean, the Bible has some very good examples about that. I mean, you look at the story of Job, for example, and all the tribulations trials that he went through as God tested his faith. And there are a whole lot of similar kind of examples in all these different ways. In Navajo, we have similar kinds of things. And some of the basic teachings that come from that, I think, is that life is not always smooth. Life is not always hunky-dory, individually, as a people, and as a world. And the teachings are to anticipate and expect hard times, and to create ourselves, to build ourselves, to be resilient people for those hard times, and to be able to cope with these hard times when they happen. The Navajo would call it naye. Naye are those things that make our lives really difficult, sometimes unbearable. But we have ways to not succumb to hopelessness and despair and anger and depression and anxiety and these emotions that can consume us this way. And I think the story of Job and the Christian Bible is a really good example of that. Through all the trials that God put him through, he never gave up faith and continued to have hope. And there are a lot of stories like that throughout the Bible and throughout native traditions and native culture. And so I tell my family, yes, COVID is difficult for us right now. It's difficult for my grandchildren because I'm not able to hold them and hug them and talk to them face to face. Yet, in the history of colonization that we face as Native people, by the end of the late 1800s, Native people numbered around a quarter million to about 250,000 natives. At the beginning of colonization, estimates are that American Indians in the United States proper numbered around 30 to 50 million. I look at that and I think, who am I to complain when my ancestors survived a lot more than I ever will in my lifetime? Am I ever going to experience genocide? Not likely. Am I ever going to experience starvation the way my great-grandmother and my grandfathers did during the times of our wars and our colonization? Not likely. And so I put it within that context, and then I'm really grateful that I have a home, I have family around me, I can visit them, maybe virtually in a lot of cases. And these are ways that we end up being adaptive to the challenges that we face today. And we're working on some teachings with Connie where we teach that this separation is just for a short time only. There will be a time in the future, maybe 2 years, 5 years from now, whatever that time frame is, when we'll go to a life that is more like what we had before COVID came in. We'll have that. And that's the hope that we have. That's the light at the end of the tunnel for me and what I teach my family. I'm not able to hug my brothers when I see them, but nonetheless, I say there'll come a time when we will be able to do that again. And we'll move beyond the elbow bumps, the fist bumps, and things like that. And then go to the ways that we are as a family, the way my mom taught me to be, the way my dad taught me to be. My dad taught me to hug my siblings and kiss them on the cheek. I'm not able to do that today, and I miss it very much. But nonetheless, putting it back into a historical context, into context that we all have basic teachings around. This is something that we can endure and get through. So those are the things that I wanted to share with everyone today. And to take, like David said, take care of yourselves, social distance, sanitize, and We'll get through this perfectly fine. We'll be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. Beautiful, beautiful. I think too that what you're saying is basically our way of thinking, and our focus on resilience, and part of the way our way of thinking is what we do every day. I know that when I'm having a hard time and someone says, I'll pray for you, that's almost all I need for the day. So I want to thank you for your words. That's very helpful. Dave, did you have anything to add to this conversation of how we can support folks and just our spirituality and how that fits for this difficult time?
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier, Connie, about maybe doing talking circles. We do for our organization. We'll get together on Friday afternoons and just have a check-in. How's everybody doing? Kind of have a light check-in. Then on a serious note, people do kind of share some things because bottom line is everybody is healthy and safe. And those around them. We've had a few people who have come close to having some health issues with COVID and things like that, or think they might, got it but got tested and it was negative, and some of those close calls. But I think that's like I also said, like my siblings and I, we connect through Messenger using video. But I think for our own mental health and well-being, that's important to be able to check in, because feeling isolated is pretty tough, and particularly if you're really in a remote area in your community, you've been feeling more isolated because people don't want to venture out too far. And if they have, I don't know if they have a stay-at-home order or not, but still, I know in our tribal communities, they really try to practice that social distancing and being safe and don't put other people's health and well-being in jeopardy. So yeah, I had one person stop by visit me, and they, okay, Dave, I gotta go. They didn't even get out of the car, and they said, I'm gonna give you a virtual hug, or the hug from a distance, and so that was pretty cool. Is the idea, the gesture, that's it goes so far, but it is tough. But at some point maybe we will be able to give it the actual hugs and things like that. But yeah, I remember the elbow bumps and the fist bumps, and really tried to just be careful and taking each other's health and well-being into account. So, but that sense of humor is still out there, though. Even during this time, I've seen people who have their beaded face mask too. Kind of go that far. Kind of make something good of it. Try to make it resilient. And before this call, Ray and I were kind of just chit-chatting, and we got on a topic of humility. I said, so I asked Ray, how humble are you? He said, I'm so humble I can tiptoe and touch the bottom of a snake. I said, well, that's good, because myself, I pride myself on my humility. All right. So anyway, that's not true. I made it up, Ray.
Yeah. First of all, getting it to net or any the net person next to a snake is really a miracle. So thank you for that story.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dave. We've had a lot of folks sharing some different things that they're doing to connect, and it might be something like telemedicine, or it might be just reaching out by email, or a lot of different ideas. And one of the things, there was a good question about how we're connecting with our youth during this time. And I think that's really important. I have to say the gifts that youth give us are amazing, but they also need support and they need us to connect at the level where they are. And so I've seen some great, Dave and I work sometimes for Native Connections, grantees that are constantly trying to, support mental health and promote, culture and positive ways of being, and the creativity that has come out of these different communities for connecting with their youth. And of course, they're adults too and their elders, but there's always that connection between elders and youth. But just some of the great things they're doing, from virtual bingo, to just different awards or just video sharing, PSAs. Ray and another huge group that we work with, we've been doing some really excellent PSAs that really help people connect with, okay, I'm here in this situation, but I'm not alone, and this isn't forever, and we're going to be back to where we're going to be. So part of spirituality really is that connection that we make with each other. But I'm also interested in any thoughts about how connecting with youth, how that's going in communities out there, and what you think works too. So thank you. And Cindy, you can always join us too.
Thank you, Connie. And just so that we're respectful of other people's time, just want to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. Thank you for sharing your stories and your resources. I had one more question before we close the session. This is a combination of two questions that were asked. So Elaine said that, it has been suggested that not all Native people could make a connection to spirituality. Therefore, it will be harmful to suggest or make them, try to connect to spirituality. And another person asked another question, which I think is related, and said, yes, they are, he agrees that there are spiritual and cultural healing ways with lots of praying if you live so as to live a long and sober life. How do we convince some people that this really works so that they can empty this to their lives? I don't know if Ray or Dave has something to add.
Well, the two questions. While you're describing the first question, Cindy, I reflected back on the early work of Euro-American researchers about the Net people. I think they call them ethnologists, people who study culture and there were in the 1870s or so, there began to be reports back to Washington that basically, in a nutshell, these reports were saying to Washington from the Indian agents and military, these Navajo people have no religion. We need to send missionaries to the Navajo people because they're devoid of religion and belief in God. Those were reports going back to Washington about my people. And the reason being is that from a surface level, Indian agents and other Euro-Americans that were coming in to try to understand the Net people didn't realize that our way of being, our spirituality, is infused in all aspects of who we are. Every breath we take and every thought we make, every thought that comes to us, and all emotions that come to us are who we are as a people. And out of respect to the deities and the creator and the universe, we conduct ourselves that way. And our prayers are private to us. We have ceremonies for times when we're having stress or troubles, but those ceremonies are basically that. Outside of ceremonies, when there are curative and healing, we as the Net people conduct our ways of being who we are. I mean, I wake up in the morning and I step outside and I breathe in the air and enjoy the light from the sun, the light from the dawn, and I blessed that I'm here, and blessed that I have family here and all of you. And for me, that's what you Americans call spirituality. You know, and how do you capture that if you're looking for churches, for example, as a way of expressing spirituality? You know, churches are not intended to be ways to express spirituality or religion. The Bible doesn't talk about it that way. Jesus in his time on earth did almost all of his sermoning and teaching and gathering outside of synagogues, because that's what he was trying to portray. And so so that's one of my responses to what you're describing, and I think that is really true with many ways of faith and many ways of being. I hear this from quite a few of my Christian brothers and sisters. Is, you know, I don't feel removed from my religion because I'm not going to church, or I don't go to church right now. That's not pertinent for my belief in God, and it's not pertinent for my prayers, because my prayers are my individual talks with the Creator, my individual talks with God, and that's, for me, spirituality in a nutshell, and the way we are. How we portray this to kids? Well, that's a really tough question, and some of us, and I'm one of those. I think my kids have taught me really well to appreciate the value of social media. You know, and I realize that a good number of Native young people, especially, and Native people who've had real unfortunate experiences in boarding school, looking for opportunities to learn, particularly those that are not here on the homeland and don't have access to healers and teachers and mentors the way I do. And so for me, it's important to provide on social media opportunities to be able to teach and share expressions of culture and expressions on ways we are as Native people. And so I've really looked at using social media, particularly Facebook, as a platform from within which to begin teaching Native young people, especially, and look for opportunities to use that, because my nephews and nieces and my grandkids, who I don't interact with a lot physically now, can use these platforms as a way to also enhance their learning, appreciate the sunsets and sunrises that happen every day, and be able to enjoy the beauty that comes with every dawn, and the nighttime sky. It's just who we are, you know. But these are ways we connect with young people, I think, and I'm glad you mentioned the project group with Connie. I think it's a very meaningful process that we're engaged in. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ray, and thank you for joining us, everyone. I think we've come to the end of our time. Wish we could have answered all of the questions, but we can see that people want more. We do have listening sessions from our center every 2 weeks on Fridays at 11 a.m. Central Time. You can reach out to me for a link for that. We discuss more of this and go into more details on specific topics. So thank you for joining us. To end our session in a good way, I'd like to call on Dave to say the closing blessing. But right before that, I would like us to just talk briefly about upcoming sessions and how you can register for this. These are the details of our center. You can reach out to me or go to our website to get more information. We still have 2 more of these sessions coming up. On the 22nd, next week, we have spirituality in the Hispanic and Latino culture and its role in prevention and healing. So please join us for that also. And the last session, we'll be talking about how we can culturally navigate between the 2 communities. After this session, we'll have the GIPRA link. So please fill out and let us know how you enjoyed this session and how we can do better. So I'll call on Dave to give us the closing blessing. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy, and thank you, Connie, for moderating our gathering, and thank you, Ray. It was an honor to be joining you on this discussion today. So, first time meeting you, and I appreciate your good words. And I know there are so many questions coming through that we didn't get to them all, but I know that they are archived, and maybe at some point those questions will be responded to. So, but with that, thinking of all of us on, staying safe and being well during this time, and think of our communities that represent the people that we work with. Just play the song on my flute here in a good way with those intentions, those thoughts of staying healthy and staying safe. Okay. Oka, matakiase.
Miigwech, Dave, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. See you next time.